Tomlinson.
And boy, oh boy, do we have a show for you tonight. But before we get into that, let's get into what's in the glass. So, Aaron, I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, so I'm going easy tonight. I've got beer. So it's a local craft beer, mountain town by us called Salida, Colorado,
Okay.
and it's chili beer. It's green chili beer.
Nice. But it's not a Bud Light or Coors Light, right?
No, I don't drink that crap.
You know what? Let me tell you something. There is one cheap beer that I drink, and that's Michelob Ultra. And the reason why I drink it is that it's low carb and low calorie.
Yeah,
So when you get to like light beers, it's probably about as good as it gets. But I only say that because the whole thing about Bud Light and Coors Light fits into our subject tonight. But before I go there, I have this raspberry mojito, courtesy of Venice Spirit Sippers.
mm,
And if you never had this stuff before, and they're not sponsors, at least not yet. But if you can get this stuff, you get it, and basically what you do is it comes in a sealed mason jar. You open it up and you pour booze in it and let it steep for a couple of days. And in 2 to 3 days, you have a really decent cocktail. All you have to do is add ice. And in the interest of what's that?
I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, I'm going to send you some. But I'm also adding this bubbly sparkling water, and this is blackberry bubbly. So
Mm,
I'm throwing a little bit of blackberry sparkling water in it to give it a little splash and to help stretch it
sounds good.
because we got a lot to talk about
Yeah,
tonight.
I got a
Lot-
I got an ice bucket here with another beer in it, so I'm ready.
right on.
That way I don't have to get up in the middle of the show.
But do you have your adult diapers?
I was
Just
just going to say, yeah, I might have to get up for other reasons though, especially because I drank a ton of water right before I jumped on because I was thirsty.
no, I'm just saying that, man. I'm over 60, so you, you know, you just can't predict these things anymore.
Right? Are we going to
No,
talk about Diaper Dawn tonight?
we are going to cover Diaper Don and the Tennessee Three um, and a whole lot of other things. I want to talk about Pete Buttigieg and I want to talk about just societal norms. And there is a actual framework for this. This is funny because uh, I posted something and basically somebody on my public page responded. He said, or whatever it was that I posted, I don't even remember now, but he said, whatever's in your Overton window. And when he said that, or when he typed that, I was like, what the fuck is an Overton window?
Yeah.
So I had to go and look it up. And so the um the Overton window, it says, is the range of policies acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. It is also known as the window of discourse. That's according to our friend Wikipedia, right?
Yeah.
And basically, you have a range from, like, let's say up or down, but let's say for the sake of our discussion, from left to right, right? And at either end of the spectrum, you have the unthinkable.
Hmm.
That this is just something that's not going to fly no matter what, right? But in between there, you have like what's called well, starting from the center, which is policy, right? And then moving in either direction, you have popular, sensible, acceptable, radical, and finally unthinkable. And from left to right, if you think about it like a number line, right? So you have those increments, and at the end, you have infinity, right? So the Overton window basically is like a yardstick. It's a template that fits over a certain range of beliefs, ideas, ideologies, and it's like, okay, that everything that's within the Overton window is basically cool. But
Hmm.
the way policy gets shifted is somebody comes up with something that is so far outside the window that it begins to move the window in the direction of whatever that extreme position is. So that is basically the Overton window, but I want to apply it because this is something that is exciting to me because every time I learn something new, it's a good day to me.
Yeah.
And I get excited and I want to share it with others. But I also want to make sure because what we do here is we give people a practical application of how to use what we say, right?
Yes.
So that's what I want to do today. So in the context of that, we're gonna talk about Diaper Don, aka the Orange Messiah or whatever you want to call him. You know, the other guy, the former guy. And then I want to talk about the Tennessee Three and the Tennessee State Legislature and how all of that shakes out. And then finally, um, I want to talk about drag queens, Pete Buttigieg, and the how this applies to LGBTQIA, right? Because all of this, you know, is basically the Overton window kind of drives all of these things, or it can be used to frame all of these things. And with that opening, Aaron, I'm going to kick it over to you and get your thoughts and let's have at it.
Yeah. So I love how you explained that. What what was surprising to me, because you talked about how discourse shifts the window. So the window, like you said, covers what's considered societal norms. And in order to create policy politically, you have to shift the window to the right or to the left so that you're changing what's normal for the society to make it acceptable to talk about, right? And so I think we've all, experienced, well, especially in the last, 6 or 7 years, politicians that say crazy things, and you sit there and think, why are they saying such crazy things? And the reason going all the way to the unthinkable shifts the window is because it makes everything less radical than that seem not as bad.
Yep.
And so it gradually makes what they're really after more acceptable.
Yep.
So if if you want to shift the norm, the norm in our society was free and fair elections were a given. Concession speeches were the norm. They were expected and accepted. So let's not only not give a concession speech, but let's claim that the election was stolen. Let's claim that there's fraud. And let's see if we can get our supporters so ginned up that they attack the Capitol, because that's so outrageous.
Yeah.
But now it's going to make things that seemed outrageously fascist years ago, it's going to seem like the norm. So there was that judge, I forget where it was at, Minnesota, I think, that didn't give a concession speech or something like
Wisconsin.
Yeah. So you're going to start to see that's going to be the new normal. I'm not going to concede. The governor of Arizona, my election was stolen.
Yep. Exactly.
So that extreme, just that is an example of shifting the Overton window. Yep. So that it'll be normal for our kids.
Yep.
Right, to have these kinds of political fights over elections, and elections being called into question now will become the norm, or maybe it already has.
And that's really, man, pushing societal norms. We had a term for that, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. We called it boiling the frog, right? Yep. Because if you throw a frog into a hot skillet, he's going to realize that it's hot, and because frogs have really quick reflexes, he's going to jump out. End of story. But if you put the frog into a pot of warm water and gradually turn the heat up, just a little bit at a time, it's a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and eventually you have frog soup, because the frog is done. And and what's happening here. And I talked about Pete Buttigieg and uh, drag queens and LGBTQIA. And let me say this. I want to preface what I say before I say anything, that I am an ally. I am a supporter. And if you've known me long enough, you know how radical that is for me. But I am an ally. I'm a supporter. Matter of fact, I'm not even just saying, because saying I'm a supporter says that I tolerate. No, I celebrate. I celebrate this community. I celebrate the diversity in it, and I celebrate the diversity in sexuality. Now, that being said, there was a something from the LGBTQIA community. What they've done is that they have utilized the Overton window to basically say, okay, this is what's policy, but now we want to move it a little bit over to what's sensible. But watch this. It isn't what's sensible that moves the needle, right? What moves the needle is the unthinkable. Because once the unthinkable becomes part of the discussion, the window moves in the direction of that unthinkable. And so and what I'm saying about the LGBTQIA community and their policy and thought leadership, that what they've done is brilliant. It's brilliant, because what they did is they actually let conservatives drive this discussion and say, if we let homosexuality and bisexuality and all of it, we let this happen, this is where it's going. It's a slippery slope. And you know what I always thought it was interesting how the mainstream LGBTQIA thought leadership didn't respond directly to that. They let the conservatives drive the discussion to an extreme point, which moves the window beyond policy to what's popular, to what's sensible, and now what's acceptable. By going beyond radical, right? And they didn't even have to do it. They let their opposition define the window. And so as a result, they got what they want. So watch this. This is what I'm getting to, and why I'm picking on former Mayor Pete, who is the Secretary of Transportation right now. It is that there is a good possibility that it would, within our lifetime, Aaron, you and I, that we'll see a Pete Buttigieg or someone from the LGBTQIA community who actually sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Mm-hmm. And again, it's because of a skilled use of the Overton window. Now, let me say this, because the right accuses the left of manipulating the Overton window. If you go out here and do any Google searches on this, you'll find that it is the right that they are constantly blasting the left and saying, well, it's the left that they're just trying to move things radically over. Well, here's what's actually happening. By them doing that, they're actually manipulating the Overton window, and they're pulling the discussion back to the right. And I can prove that. With first of all, the Tennessee Three. Mm-hmm. The Tennessee Three, which two guys named Justin. Hang on for a second, because I have this pulled up. I hate when I don't have things together. Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and then there was another lady, and I can't remember her name. I don't have it right up in front of me, but it basically two black men and a white woman that they got in front of the Tennessee legislature and lambasted the whole gun culture. And what happened was is that the Republican-led legislature expelled 2 out of the 3, the 2 black men. Now, here's the thing: this is not going to stand because, first of all, the way this works is that if they're going to have special elections, and these guys can run again in the special election, and they will likely get reelected. But even before that happens, this is going to go before the Supreme Court. And it's going to be a litmus test on what legislatures can do. Now, here's the Overton window, right? The Overton window policy is elected officials get elected to office. They don't get they get expelled if they commit crimes. They get expelled if they violate policy rules. They don't get expelled for being in opposition to a legislative agenda. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. But now what the Overton window has been pushed extremely to the right. The unthinkable has happened. And so now the window is going to shift unless something happens that shifts it back the other way. And so let me stop there because I can really get on a rant, and I know you have a rant on this too. So I want you to vent.
Yeah. So I want to nuance the frog in the kettle illustration, because that's generally used exactly like you said. You put the frog in the warm kettle of water and you turn it up incrementally by degrees so that it slowly boils over time. So yep. The idea is you're inching your way along to something. So if we're going to use the Overton window, let's say you want the unthinkable. So you have to start with the, let's say, policy, and you have to move it to the acceptable, then to the unacceptable, like you're inching along, right? Gradually turning it up. I'm going to nuance that just a little bit because the way this works, it's counterintuitive. And this just blew my mind when you introduced me to this and I looked at some stuff about it. So let's say that the frog won't sit in the warm kettle. So you boil some water and you throw the frog in the boiling water, and the frog reacts and jumps out of the boiling water. Mm-hmm. And now gladly accepts the lukewarm water that you wanted him in the first place.
Oh man, that's brilliant.
But at least it's not boiling, right? Mm-hmm. So back to the LGBTQTIA or whatever, they keep adding letters. So I hope I didn't miss anybody. 2S, Two-Spirit is one now too. So, back in the 90s, I guess, is when gay couples started to be somewhat normalized. And the issue was gay marriage. So gay marriage was, at the time, unthinkable.
Right.
So they start the discussion about gay marriage. And it was a shock to the norm, because the norm is always this monogamous relationship between one man and one woman, right? I mean, the religious right absolutely flipped their lid over it.
Yep.
The marriage is sacred. So what happened was, okay, we'll have domestic partnerships, but you can't call them marriages because marriage is sacred. We'll allow for, I remember, and the reason I know it was in the 90s was because the company that I was working for changed their insurance policy where you could put a domestic partner on your health insurance and they could have benefits, right?
Yep.
So they were getting what they were after, which was domestic partnerships and what you could share that had only been exclusively the domain of married couples, right? So and then eventually, at least for most people, I think, maybe I can't say this, I don't want to offend anybody on that side of the aisle, but gay marriages are, at least here in Colorado, they're normal. They're the norm. They're accepted. They're policy. And you see gay couples out frequently, right? Yep. So it moved It shifted everything. It moved the norms. Now, let's talk about Trump's indictment, because the pushback that I keep hearing about this indictment in Manhattan is, it wasn't a big deal. He was just paying hush money. So remember Gary Hart?
You know what? Funny you mentioned him, but go on.
So I was, I don't even think I was old enough to vote then. So I don't remember. You probably remember the details better than I do. But Gary Hart was from Colorado. And so, he was entering the presidential race. And he had photographs or something with a woman on his yacht that wasn't his wife or something.
Yep. Donna Rice.
Yeah. Okay. So my memory's not failing me that bad.
Nope.
And it was a scandal. And he was out of
he was out of politics.
Out of politics completely.
It pretty much ruined him. But he was the front runner.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah. So now, and then we had, of course, the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing. We had, all that other stuff. Every president, right?
Yep.
Some kind of scandal. So now the president of the United States can go out and break the law, 34 felony counts. And because corruption has become so normal, it's become so normalized that, they shouldn't be prosecuting him. Even people on the left, even Democrats, they shouldn't be prosecuting him. This case is weak. This case doesn't have any teeth. They're going to prosecute him over that. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
And that's how it works.
I mean, here's the funny thing about this, right? Because now I've heard people say, well, Bill Clinton actually got a blowjob in the Oval Office. All of Trump's crimes were committed before he became president, or at least these that he's been indicted for.
Right.
Because as they say in infomercials, but wait, there's more, right? So, but what happened is that the case that Alvin Bragg has put together is that before Trump got elected, he worked through Michael Cohen and the National Enquirer to bury stories that would possibly be detrimental to his campaign. So essentially what was done is that state and possibly federal campaign finance laws were violated.
Right.
Now, here's the whole thing about that, right? It's one thing for constituents, followers, supporters to say, well, which one of us hasn't slept with someone else that wasn't our wife? And if you look at it, if you take that as a nuance, okay, I'll give you that. Mm-hmm. But here's where the Overton window is kicking in, because now you have actual politicians, legislators, duly elected officials who are codifying this as acceptable behavior. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that, like, for example, Trump didn't release his tax records. Well, every president since 1948 has released their tax records. But now you have someone who's not doing that. Mm-hmm. And this could become the norm, or paying off hush money, that this becomes the norm. And so what happens is that the entry bar for leadership drops dramatically. It's like now it's not even you're expected to limbo over this or under this. You just step over because it's not a big deal. Well, the problem is, and here, let me say this. First of all, this is my opinion. Sex is not a big deal. You know, that, and if you have an affair, that's not a big deal. I don't think that automatically disqualifies you. What I do think disqualifies you is when you use or abuse campaign finance constraints to cover up your indiscretions. Now that's a problem. Or that you did this because you knew that this could potentially derail your candidacy. So watch this. Here we have in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote, but he won the electoral college. Lost the popular vote, but he won the electoral college. Now, what would have happened if these stories came out a week or two before the election, which is actually the timing of all of this? This is actually the timing. Well, we don't know. I mean, on the one hand, Trump said that he could shoot somebody at Times Square at high noon and his supporters would still support him. Well, that's mostly true. But there would be enough, I think, that would be aghast at what he did to say, no, this is not what we want in leadership, and that ends his candidacy. So that's the thing. And so let me throw another one in here. This is a bonus one because this just popped up on my screen. Clarence Thomas.
I was thinking about that too when I was preparing for this. I was thinking about that.
First of all, I have to say this in the interest of humor, right? Does anyone else find it funny that Uncle Thomas went on a vacation with Jim Crow? Am I the only one who sees that as funny? Am I the only one who catches that? This guy, here's the thing: the Supreme Court has always been the bastion of the untouchable.
Yep.
Basically, these are people who are above reproach in all levels. And you could go back and look at any Supreme Court justice, even some in recent history. I'm going to pick on a conservative, John Roberts. John Roberts, about as conservative as they come, there is no dirt that this man does. He has a perfect credit score. He's a pillar of his community. He was rated high by the ABA. All of these things. He is a guy that in the strictest sense of doing wrong does no wrong. Even his wife, his kids, everything about this guy is squeaky clean. And typically that's been the case with Supreme Court justices. But here you have Clarence Thomas, who's riding on Gulfstream jets, who's sailing on private yachts and spending time in private resorts that are owned by some billionaire who is a huge contributor to Republican causes and candidates. And not only that, come to find out, to expand the dirt portfolio, Kirsten Sinema and David Manchin, that these two people are also getting money from the same dude. And that explains a lot about those two, because they have, even though they're Democrats, they're dinos, Democrats in name only, like rhinos, right? They're getting money from this guy. And that explains their whole legislative agenda. But again, this is the Overton window. What is acceptable? So here's what happens now that these people are going to have to go back to the constituents, and they're going to have to, as they said on I Love Lucy, explain Lucy, right? You're going to have to explain what's going on, and they're going to have to give some account to their constituents as to why they took this money, right? And what's going to happen is they are going to splain this. Mansplain it, womansplain it, demosplain it. I don't know they're going to splain it to everybody in such a way that what's going to happen is that the Overton window concerning what people are, what is acceptable to take from a contributor is going to move.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about this concept, and I don't, I don't know that this is a deliberate thing, because both sides or any group with an agenda for policy uses this
Yep.
system. But think about even unintentionally using it, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. But we've seen some outrageous behavior from people in Congress that I never thought we'd see in our lifetime. Outrageous behavior from the president, former president, during his time in office. Following his Twitter feed was almost a entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
but it was disgusting at the same time. So, and this is what I mean, Derrick. So this guy can go out and misspell words. He got indicated, not indicted.
Yeah.
All caps, no commas, or using commas wrong.
Don't forget the morning COVID fee.
The what?
COVID fee.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because I actually can read.
And then you've got people like Lauren Boebert. She's in my district, so I'll pick on Lauren Boebert. Sorry, guys, we voted against her, did our best, but it is what it is. She makes the most ignorant statements about super basic stuff that she should have learned in high school if she'd finished high school in her government class, right? Or civics class.
Yep.
And she put a tweet out when Trump was indicated that if they can go after a former president for his crimes, they can go after us for our crimes. And she put that out in a tweet. Think about that. I'm going to say that again for people who missed it. If they can go after the president for his crimes, then they can go after us for our crimes too. Meaning they can go after anybody for their crimes. Well, duh.
Well, I think that there's a hidden indicator there that she admitted that she's a criminal.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, there was absolutely a Freudian slip there for sure.
Yeah, I had to throw that out there.
No, yeah. And so then you have her and Marjorie Taylor Greene heckling the president during a State of the Union.
The answer to what if a yeast infection had a face? Sorry. Not sorry.
So we're seeing all this outrageous behavior. So what behavior now that we used to think was outrageous is now going to be normalized? Now it's going to be normalized to not spell something. I mean, if you're in Congress, you ought to at least have a spell check.
Yeah.
You ought to at least have a team around you that makes sure that you're at least somewhat accurate about things that most people know. You know what I mean? So how low is the bar going to get then for excellence in leadership? How far is how much is the window going to slide for the way we treat one another? And not just in Congress, but at every level. We're in a real crisis of leadership, at least the way I see it, at every level of society. And abuse of power has become so normalized that we don't take it seriously anymore. You know what I mean? Yep. And so trying to raise your kids in that environment, my kids are still at the place where I'm trying to teach them respect. I'm trying to teach them stuff like this. And yet our leaders that are in the public eye that the public votes for are an absolute total embarrassment and a disgrace. Lauren Boebert is an absolute embarrassment and an absolute disgrace of a human being. Now, let's apply that same thing to racial issues. What kind of behavior that used to be taboo, at least openly, maybe using the N-word, right?
Yep.
Super taboo. But now we've got, people like Alex Jones, who's just
name names, man.
Or I didn't even know what the Proud Boys, who the Proud Boys were until that debate between that first debate, where they tried to get Trump to denounce his support for white supremacy, and Biden mentioned the Proud Boys as a group. I've never even heard of them. And now they're practically a household name. So by putting the unthinkable out there in terms of white supremacists, like they don't have to meet on the dark web anymore.
Right.
Now they're on Twitter. So then what other behaviors that are unacceptable are going to start to become acceptable? And is it possible that this country could backslide, to use the term correctly,
Yep,
in our race relations in this country? And that's a really sickening thought, actually.
Well, no, that I think that you called that one absolutely correctly. And by the way, the white woman who survived the vote in Tennessee, her name is Gloria Johnson. I looked it up to make sure that, but basically, you hear people talk about saying the silent parts aloud,
Yeah.
right? We know that there is a racial undertone to virtually everything in this country.
Yeah.
We know that exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even in post-Reconstruction America, even in the era of Jim Crow, even in the post or the pre-Voting Rights Act and pre-Civil Rights Act, Congress and even the presidency, that there was a certain decorum
Mm-hmm.
that said there are certain things you can't say, and there are certain things you can't openly be associated with.
Right.
Like for example, Robert Byrd, who was he was the Senate Majority Leader for many years. I mean, he was a former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Strom Thurmond, who was the longest serving senator in American history. Strom Thurmond was a strict segregationist up until the end. Even after they had revealed that he had a black daughter, right? But these are the silent parts. There is a certain decorum that you can't associate yourself with that. But now you have political candidates. You have Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are attending conferences that are run by white supremacists, mm-hmm. right? You have you have people like Matt Gaetz, who's associated with known pedophiles,
mm-hmm.
and all of these things. Well, let's stick to the racial thing for a second, because I'm getting off into the weeds here. But I remember the whole Charlottesville thing, and basically the organizers of the Charlottesville protests, they took pages right out of the Nazi playbook. They were like doing everything like the Third Reich did, and they even down to the slogans: blood and soil, they will not replace us, all of that, right? And they'll say that they were talking about the Jews, but actually the they is a broader construct. And so here Donald Trump has his moment.
Mm-hmm.
He has his leadership moment, mm-hmm. where he can speak up and say, you know something, I don't care who it is, I refuse to align myself with racism. I refuse to align myself with Christian nationalism. I refuse to align myself with any of this. Instead, what he says, there are very fine people on both sides.
Yeah.
So what he did then, and this is another thing in my preparation for this, people say that politicians actually manage the Overton window, but they don't.
Right.
The people, you and I, we manage the Overton window.
Right.
Politicians simply play it. They basically what they are they so let's put it like this. Like, let's say that we manage the goalposts. We move the goalposts a little to the left, a little to the right. We manage the wind and the weather around the kick. The politicians, they figure out how to place the kick
Mm-hmm.
and score the goal. So when you talk about racial issues, what's happening now, this whole thing that's happening in Tennessee, this has wide-reaching ramifications, because what Republicans have done over the last 10, 20 years, they've managed to get enough votes to control voting districts, gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've done this in such a way that right now they said that in Florida, it is impossible to get a black representative because of the way districts are gerrymandered. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows that this is wrong. I mean, we learned about this in civics in high school, that gerrymandering was a bad thing, but this is what they do. And so now what's going to happen is basically the Tennessee three, you're going to have like Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, that they're going to have to fight for re-election. And that'll happen for one cycle. But what will happen is that the Republican-led legislature of Tennessee will work with the Republican governor of Tennessee to gerrymander the districts so that you don't get a Justin Jones or a Justin Pearson again. Mm-hmm. And that's the danger. But again, what it is saying, okay, now it used to be, I can't say I want to redistrict to keep black candidates from gaining success. But what we're getting to is the point where people will actually be able to come right out and say, we're doing this to make sure that we keep white majorities and that we don't have minority representation, because we're losing our place.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I need
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is off topic, Derrick, and I don't know why my mind went here, but I'll bring it up and kick it out to you and see what you think. But
what we do.
One of the examples, one of the videos you sent me on this topic, one of the examples was mandated healthcare, that's by law, you have to have health insurance, right?
Yeah.
And how they were using the Overton window how Mitt Romney was using
Mitt Romney. He's the one that originated the individual mandate, not Obama.
Right. And how they did that strategically to prevent, so like the mandate's going to come one way or the other. So let's do the mandate, but let's keep it away from a single payer system or publicly funded healthcare. Yep. And that got me thinking about the war on the middle class. I mean, there has just been a very, and like I said, I'm shifting the topic here, but there's been a very strategic war on the middle class that I just find really interesting, because so I looked it up. Middle class income in America is considered between 50,000 and 150,000 household income in a year. That's what they consider middle class. So the people who get screwed by the mandates are primarily the people in that window, right? Because you don't have enough to pay for the health insurance. and pay your bills, but you make too much to be
Get on Medicaid.
Considered for Medicaid. Exactly.
Yep.
So the further you are away from the higher end of the middle class, the more of a dilemma that you have of, do I work or don't I work? Right? If you're only $3,000 or $4,000 above poverty level in this country, where you qualify for services, you qualify for, housing assistance, you qualify for food stamps, you qualify for Medicaid and that kind of stuff, it's in your best interest not to work, right? But then how do you advance? Like it puts a lid and a cap on that, right? And so you see this same kind of sliding scale. It doesn't really fit with the window as much, but there's this sliding scale, right? Where the middle class
fits perfectly with the window.
Is getting the middle class is getting completely screwed. So let's look at our tax laws in this country, right? So let's look at the squeeze being put on small business owners. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible in this country anymore to run a small business. Mom and pop restaurants are kind of a thing of the past, at least around here. And even those mom and pop restaurants are getting crappy food. Like, I don't know, has anybody else out there noticed that like restaurant food has gotten really crappy? Like,
it really has.
They're serving you, well, essentially they're serving you warmed up TV dinners and charging you $25 for that plate.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I can't even eat at Cracker Barrel anymore because I used to love their chicken, but their chicken has gotten so disgusting because it's just frozen and they don't thaw it out. They don't, there's no fresh ingredients. They just basically heat it up. And then they charge you more, right? Yep. But back to the tax code, and I'm kind of rambling all over the place, but all this thing about, taxing, like the whole trickle down economics thing and people voting against their own self-interests when they're middle class. We don't want to tax the rich, right? Or we're going to give the rich all kinds of loopholes so that they make enough money that they can buy everything in their life with pre-tax dollars. Their house is bought by their company, their car is bought by their company, their dinners are paid for, their vacations are paid for, all that stuff with pre-tax dollars that they write off and then don't pay any taxes on any of that money that comes in. But if you're a small business owner, you don't have enough, let's say, if you're just starting out, to have those tax shelters. You see what I'm saying? And you're getting screwed at 15% self-employment tax. That's before you even pay state or federal income tax.
Yep.
So it's just, and I look at that and my heart breaks for young people today because to come up with the money, just put a down payment on a house, much less buy a house, is ridiculous. And that used to be the norm in America. Derrick, it used to be the norm, at least for my folk, right? To think that, buying a house was not going to be a big deal. Now, I realize there's other people in America that were very underprivileged, but I'm talking about the middle class.
Yep.
For middle class people, it was the norm to expect that you could buy a house. There's no way in that $50,000 to $150,000 window that you can just go out and buy a house without saving for years and paying rent to these conglomerates, these organizations that are coming in and buying up land and buying up houses and building copycat houses right next to each other, or these condominiums and townhouses, just, miles and miles and miles of them. They're all the same. And that's what you can afford to get into. It's crazy. All right, I'll kick it back to you.
But that's the Overton window at work.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example here because, and I'll use me as an example. President Biden proposed a tax plan to Congress, and in his tax plan, he said that no one making less than $400,000 would see their taxes increase.
Right.
Now, full disclosure, I'm one of those people.
Right.
And what's happening is that the goalposts of what's middle class is moving upward. Is moving upward.
Absolutely.
So but here's the thing, that contrary to what the way the Overton window normally works is that normally the window remains the same size.
Right.
No matter which way it moves, the window is the window.
Right.
But in this particular case, the window is moving because it's saying that some people who are lower middle class, or people who had been in poverty or just on the edge of poverty, now they're being considered as middle class. And
Yep.
so a lot of things that were made available to them to mitigate their poverty
Yep.
are no longer available to them.
Exactly.
And that's, this is what really irritates me about American politics is that, and this, like people will say, well, Democrats, Republicans, they're the same, and this is the spot where I will agree with those folks, because there is no real champion for the poor or the lower middle class.
Right.
Everybody is trying to adjust their platform to upward. And so what's happening is that there are a lot of people that are left behind, a lot of people that are disenfranchised, underserved, or whatever you want to call it. And that's and let me say this. This is my belief. I'm a caveat with this is my belief, that the intent is to narrow what is actually middle class, and basically to take an entire group, an entire economic strata, and leave them in limbo. In other words, they're not middle class, but they're not poor, right? But they can't afford housing, they can't afford health care, they can't afford food, they can't afford transportation. And so a lot of these people are just going to be kind of left in limbo. And so what happens is that these people will have no voice, they'll have no representation, and they'll just be kind of left out to wither and die.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost think that a lot of what we see in the manipulation of the Overton window is a bit of social Darwinism.
Mm-hmm.
One of those videos that I sent you, it was like it was done by someone over in Sweden, and basically he was talking about Swedish politicians that when they started implementing their socialist safety nets over there, that there was one politician that they put up on the screen and said, if they die, they die. And that's kind of where this is. And watch this. That when you look at Black people, Latino people, LGBTQIA people, that I think that the aim is to eventually starve these people out. And once you starve them out, they lose, they're totally disenfranchised. They become people without country. They have no representation. They have no advocacy. And eventually, given a sufficiently long timeline, they die out. And I really think that that's what the right wants to do. And also, some of the more elitist liberals want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I want to throw out to the people who are listening in the Overton window. that me personally, I think that the saving grace of the United States is socialism in some form. I'm not saying that we should become totally socialist, but I think that we should get asymptotically close to that. Because if you don't have this, capitalism ultimately will destroy the working class. And what will happen then is that as power and money becomes to coalesce in the hands of fewer and fewer and fewer, that some of these wealthy people now will be pushed out. And eventually you will have a nation of serfs and lords. We'll be back to European feudalism all over again.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that this is all leading. But I want to go back to racism real quick, and then I'll stop. Mm-hmm. Is that if you believe that somehow the pie is finite and that the gains of others, the gains of minorities, happen at the expense of the majority, which is not true. The pie is not finite, but that's another thing. But if you believe that, right, then your goal is going to be to limit the access of the minorities to whatever upward mobility they can get, so that you maintain your status, your power, because you think that someone else gaining is going to cause you to lose. And so my challenge to everybody that's watching this is to take this and move this to the left a bit. That you know, single payer health care, universal basic income, universal unionizing or workers' rights, universal access to capital, and and universal education, right? So if we were to get like these 5 things pushed through, and this, one of the funny things is conservatives, the right, is trying to dismantle Social Security. Social Security is
bring that up.
The single most successful socialist program in the history of this country. Now, if you turn back Social Security, that means that there is no hope for anything socialist going forward. But if we're able to hold serve on Social Security, now we can say, okay, what else can we do that's like Social Security, that has the same premise as Social Security, and maybe the same kind of results that Social Security got. Now we can say, okay, now we're looking out for the least of us. And so let me say this. I'm going to bring Jesus into this for a minute. I'm going to bring Jesus into this, because he said that whatever you do to the least of them, you also do to me. And so for anybody out there that is at least paying lip service to Christianity, you need to hear this, because the Savior that you worship would be in favor of helping those who are less fortunate. And if you're not down with that, you're really not down with your Savior. You're down with something else. And I would ask you to be intellectually honest and just say, and be intellectually honest and say, fuck Christianity and fuck Jesus. But if you're going to hold on to that paradigm, then act it out.
Yeah, we should do a show on the politics of Jesus and compare it to what we're seeing today.
Coming next Friday.
I want to say this about Social Security, and I don't know. The part of me thinks like, how do I want to say this? Like, can we come together around socioeconomic issues that we share in common, whether we're white, black, Asian, Latino, Latina, Latinx, whatever?
Yep.
Because it's really a poverty issue as well. Now, when groups are kept poor because of the color of their skin, that's when race becomes part of that discussion. But we're basically fucked. So when I heard that the Republicans wanted to, tear Social Security up from the roots, that to me, that was the unthinkable. That was like my unthinkable in my window. I'm like, what the hell are you guys thinking? Because number one, it's a huge voting block for Republicans are people over 65, right?
Yep.
But it's not going to, they'll make sure it doesn't affect them. And then it finally dawned on me, that's a tax cut for corporations. If we get rid of Social Security, we just gave a major tax cut and tax break to big corporations.
Yep.
Now, I think it was, and again, you're a little bit older than me and you were a little bit more involved with politics than I was during the, Reagan and Bush era, but destroying the unions in this country, breaking up the unions in this country, all that did was allow all that money to stay at the top. If we pull out Social Security, all we're doing is enriching these corporations even more. And that's why people, they're critical of socialism. They're afraid of socialism, but they don't understand we've got corporate socialism going on in our country already.
Right.
But it's not benefiting society. It's not benefiting the majority. So this is what's so paradoxical and so ironic, is that we champion ourselves as a nation that's government of the people, by the people, for the people, right?
Yep.
But it's not working for people. It's working for their donors, frankly. It's working for their donors.
Yep.
And the middle class is getting squeezed out. Wages are not keeping up at all with inflation. But that's why they want to do it. So when they're saying, we don't have enough money to support Social Security, that's just somebody that's just somebody's bullshit. What it is it's a tax break for the wealthy if you get rid of Social Security.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, is that like,
and by wealthy, I mean what? Super wealthy.
Yeah. I mean, well, watch this, right? Executive salaries are up 1,500% over the last 20 years. Actual wages of workers is down almost 50% when adjusted for inflation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What, like in Japan, they have a law that says a CEO cannot make more than 100 times the salary of the lowest employee.
Yeah. I mean, well, in Spain, so when there were supply chain issues, or the price of oil was, going up and up and up and up, just a year or two ago.
Yep.
So what the Spanish government did was they subsidized box stores, grocery stores, people that would be affected by the supply chain. They subsidized the gas prices for those companies, for the nation as well. But here's the line of thought. Mm-hmm. We're going to take that money that comes in, the government money, we're going to use it to deflate the price of gasoline in our country. And then they put a cap on inflation across the nation so that stores could only raise their prices. I think they capped it at 10% or something like that. So they had the foresight to say, you're not going to be able to use supply chain issues or the price of oil as an excuse to inflate the prices in order to really victimize in a monetary way the people in this country.
Yep.
Why are we afraid of that? Because
And
we
again,
hear some bullshit on Fox News about, oh, we don't want to become a socialist country, we become a piece of shit country like Finland, Sweden, and Greece, and whatever, and have to, well, a lot of the people
Aaron, I don't remember if it was you who said this or not, but I heard this that, and for some reason I'm thinking that it's you that Nixon was the last New Deal president. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and that Nixon had implemented wage and price controls as a means of curbing inflation.
right,
Right. And that was like when you say wage controls, capitalism is all on board with that. But when you say price controls, now capitalism is going against you. And I've heard stories that maybe that's why they had to get rid of Nixon. It wasn't the criminal activity. It was the fact that he was the last guy to do something New Dealish, right? And again, it's if you are trying to do something to help the rank and file, the average citizen, and again, this is what I think. This has always been my take on America, that a wealthy and benevolent society should provide for the upward mobility, at least, of the most disenfranchised.
yeah,
And we don't do that. And instead of trying to help people, we're trying to drive them further and further down. We're boiling the frog more and more. We're moving the Overton window instead of moving it in a utopian direction, we're moving it in a more dystopian or Faustian direction, right? And this is what we have to. And again, all of you who are listening, if you're listening, that it is incumbent upon each and every one of us to speak up for those who cannot or are prevented from speaking up for themselves. It is incumbent upon us to look after those who are disenfranchised, those who are downtrodden, those who are oppressed. It is incumbent upon us because, listen, if you don't do this for the least of them today, when it comes to your backyard, when it comes to you, it's going to be too late. If you don't speak up now, if you're not vocal now, by the time it reaches you, the frog is completely boiled, and all it is now at that point is just add vegetables, boys and girls, because the frog is completely done.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'm getting depressed.
You know what? Here's the thing. Don't you get depressed because here's the thing. Your voice, and I'm going to say this. Let me say this on behalf of my brother and my friend Aaron, is that he is a consistent voice of the downtrodden and the oppressed. He is a consistent advocate of those who don't have a voice to speak for themselves or their voice is unheard. He is a consistent voice of those who are racially oppressed. This is the guy. You are the guy, dude.
I'm just saying it's overwhelming, when you think about all the just the way the system's rigged, and how does a person today get out of poverty? But because here's the other thing they're doing, and then I'm gonna close with this because we could go on down this dark tunnel for the rest of the night. But they're also destroying generational wealth in this country.
Bingo.
And that's a big deal. When the price of a home is what it is, they're taking your wealth. It just kills me that the answer to inflation, goddamn well, the prices at the restaurants and the grocery stores are not coming down. They're not coming down. So what we're going to do is we're going to, what's going down, the prices that have consistently dropped has been in technology.
Yep.
Right? Because it's so ubiquitous. It's so everywhere. It's not it's not in demand like it was, when computers first came out, or flat screen TVs first came out. Flat screen TVs, you can get a 65-inch, maybe a few years ago was $2,000 or $3,000. Now you can get one for a few $100, right?
Yep.
But damn well, like, some of this stuff's not coming down. So what they decide to do is raise interest rates. This just kills me. For people out there that aren't paying attention, or your school was like my school and guilty of malpractice, and they didn't teach you stuff that was really important in life because they were so focused on making sure they taught you math the same way. I mean, think about how fucking ridiculous conservatives are. Talk about the party of faux outrage. We're gonna pitch a fit because of Common Core. They're teaching Common Core. They need to teach math the way I learned math. Who gives a flying fuck? They need to teach you personal finance. They need to teach you economics, both macro and micro, so you know what the hell's going on out there. Okay, back to taking out generational wealth. So what then happens is they raise interest rates, and I know you know this, Derrick, but because it's going to make it more expensive for people to borrow money, so therefore they're not going to be able to spend as much. Right. So, and the biggest place you can impact inflation numbers as a politician is big ticket items.
Yep.
You know damn well your Starbucks coffee ain't going down anytime soon. So they're going to come after the big ticket items. So the hope is that it's going to drop the price of housing, which I've already been saying, I think is a travesty, that people who are starting out in life have it much harder than I did, right? But that's also going to take away some of your generational wealth from people. Because your house that was worth $500,000, if there's a housing market crisis, it's maybe going to be worth $250,000, cut in half. Well, that's going to make their inflation numbers look better, but it didn't help you at the grocery store. It didn't make your Starbucks any cheaper. All it did was take away your wealth. Because for most people, their house is their biggest investment, right? It's their biggest equity.
Yep.
And then what they've done to farmers, the farming community, because I come from the farming community, I do know what I'm talking about. Farmers and ranchers. I have ranchers on one side of the family, and I was surrounded by agricultural business my entire life, right?
Yep.
And so thank you, Ronald Reagan, everybody, great communicator.
Hey, Ronald.
Paid farmers not to farm, to manipulate the commodities market. And so what happened is that agriculture and ranching, beef, let's just take beef, for example. The price of beef is basically regulated by 3 corporate conglomerates in the world. So that means the small rancher, and by small rancher, I mean 2,000 acres, right? Let's talk about that guy. He can't compete with that. So what they do is they squeeze out these smaller ranchers or farmers or whatever the case may be, so that they feel the pinch, and then the government will come in to solve the problem. Here's some socialism for you. The government will come in to solve the problem, and they'll say, we'll buy your cattle for $2 million. And then they will show up and shoot your cattle.
Wow.
And successfully put a family or families out of business where that ranch had sustained for generations. So now you've got these giant food companies that are controlling everything and making all the money, and all this generational wealth in the agricultural business, where it just went from family to family to family. Property that was in my family for over 100 years is no more. It's been, bought up and subdivided, and everybody owns a little share of it, with their little house and their little quarter of an acre or whatever the case may be. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So all these things are working against middle class America. Now that trickles down then to people that aren't even in the middle class. So now, like you said, how do you move the needle forward? How do you progress? How do you make a jump from being on Medicaid, having food stamps, having housing? How do you make the jump? So anyway,
you know what? Let me say this, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. I promise. Is that I don't know if you were like this, but like during the 80s and 90s, when Americans led the list of billionaires, and American companies led the list of mergers and acquisitions, I used to be like, USA, 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 right? And I would get all hyped about this. And what I realize now is that I was cucking for billionaires.
That's what it is.
And I mean, that's exactly what it is. And the reality is, none of this benefited me in any real or tangible way.
Right.
And none of this helped me. And again, I'm on the upper end of the spectrum.
Right.
So if it doesn't benefit me, it sure as fuck doesn't benefit somebody that's making 30 grand a year.
Right.
Let's look at the comments.
Yeah, let's do that. Like I said, we're going down a dark rabbit hole here.
Yeah, because I could go on and on about this, but the reality is that everybody that's listening is that you have the power to move this window. The Overton window, you have the power to move this window. Here's the thing. Politicians don't have the ability to move it. All they're doing is they're licking their finger and putting it in the wind and determining whether or not they can make this kick or not, right? You're the one who's moving the goalposts. You're deciding what the width of the goal is or what side of the field that it's on. You decide that. And again, if we all collectively look at this, and goddamn, if we could just come to the conclusion that we are all in this together, this is Aaron. This is the thing that I love about you, brother, is that I think you may be the single most egalitarian person I know.
Wow, that's a huge compliment.
I'm serious.
That may be the best compliment I've ever gotten.
I mean, because whether it's race, whether it's sex, whether it's economics, dude, you are there you're in the sweet spot around the bullseye if you're not actually on the bullseye. And I can't tell you how honored and humbled I am to be connected to you.
Well, goes both ways. And we want to keep it practical and empowering for people. And I hope if nothing else, like you have to know the strategies that these people are using to shift and change policies that affect our lives, Yep. And it would be nice if in this country we could get back to understanding that politics is about policies. And if we could come back to dialogue and discussion and conversation, because that's what drives the needle. I mean, that's what drives the needle. That's what moves the window. What drives this window is conversation and dialogue. That's what changes it. It's a changing of ideas, right? Yep. And we don't dialogue with each other anymore. And when we do dialogue with each other, it's insults. Oh, yep. that woke mob out there, or I think it's so ironic that Rush Limbaugh. I'm going to tell on myself, but I think it's so ironic that Rush Limbaugh used to talk about the uninformed voters or the idiot voters, or what did he call them? Mm-hmm. You elected Lauren Boebert.
Well, let me piggyback on that, right? For everybody that's out there crying about somebody who's woke, let me tell you what, the opposite of that is sleep. So do you want to be woke? You want to be awake, or do you want to be asleep? And that's the thing that really amazes me.
You know what's interesting, Derrick, is I can think about, maybe this is just because I've changed so much in my journey here, but I can think about all the insults that conservatives throw at Democrats or progressives. But I can't think of too many insults that come from the other side from like our side of the aisle back the other way. Like I can think of the woke mob is coming after me. They make woke a bad word. Think about that. They make woke a bad word. They make liberal a bad word. The libtards, that kind of stuff. I really can't think of cliche terms that the left uses and throws at the right. I mean, I really can't. So somebody in the comments can help me if that's a blind spot for me. But I would have all these conservative people when I was shifting my viewpoints in politics, and I would inadvertently talk about it sometimes on a Sunday morning in a message and not realize I was, taking a shit in a punch bowl when I was doing that.
I will never be able to unsee that.
I didn't, because I wasn't paying attention. I was just sharing how my thoughts were evolving, and somehow I'd always managed to get on whatever the hot topic was on Fox News that week, right? But people would come up to me and they would always say, well, liberals, they're just so hateful. They're just full of hate, and they're just mean-spirited people. And I'm like, that's not been my experience. I even when I was a conservative and preaching conservative principles, the liberals in our congregation, even I remember this black lady, I loved her to death, and I didn't know shit about the racial issues in this country back then. I didn't know anything about the history of it. I didn't understand anything at all about the plight of a black man or a black woman. Not at all. I would make some of the dumbest statements, and she would just graciously and gracefully get up, and she would go downstairs, and you know what she would do, Derrick?
What's that?
She would start, we had a fellowship hall and a kitchen in the basement of our church. She'd go down in the basement and she'd just start cleaning. She'd start serving. She'd start working in the church. And then she would just, shake her head with me or whatever. But never did I encounter anyone that was horrible or awful. But when the shoe was on the other foot, when I was talking about more the politics of Jesus, like how can you, like I remember, saying this when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee during the national anthem, and that was a big deal, front and center. And I said, you got to be careful. I was admonishing the congregation. You have to be careful that the symbol doesn't become more important than the principle. Because here you have a guy exercising his right to free speech, which is all about a critique of the government in the nation in which you live. It's not really about, we still need to do something on the Bill of Rights because people don't understand the Bill of Rights. It's not really about having the freedom to say whatever the hell you want. It's having the freedom to critique your own government without being thrown in prison for it.
Well, and let me take that a step further, because it's about being able to critique your government and also being able to say things that don't cause harm to others.
Right. But my point with Colin Kaepernick was he was exercising his right to free speech, and they were more committed to the symbol, the flag, which should be a symbol of the liberties that we have in this country. They were more committed to the symbol than they were to the principle. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
They should have celebrated. I mean, he's honoring the flag by exercising his right to free speech by choosing not to stand and honor his flag. He's actually honoring it. And it was a crazy meltdown. I mean, we had revival in reverse after that message. People were so hateful. So anyway, I'll get off that. So well, I guess
go ahead. Let me say this because I got to throw this in because this is the Good Friday bonus, right?
Yeah.
Because we talk about the sacrifice of Jesus, that he died for our sins and all of this. And here's the thing, that I can make the case that Jesus is a fictional character, that there is no archaeological or anthropological evidence that supports his existence. But there are people who have actually sacrificed for the betterment of humanity. April 4th, which just passed 3 days ago, was the 40, oh no, 51st anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. Here's a guy, and let me say this to everybody that's watching, that when Dr. King was talking about racial equality, talking about civil rights, talking about voting rights, talking about housing, and those things are not the things that got Dr. King assassinated. When Dr. King started talking about how the United States government gave land grants to Scandinavians coming to America, that they basically resettled Minnesota and the Dakotas, yeah, and that land grants were given for colleges and universities, that when he was talking about the evils of the Vietnam War, those are the things, folks, that got Dr. King assassinated. In other words, what I'm getting at is that in this season that we talk about sacrifice, that there are people who have basically given their lives, so that and they've given their lives not only so that Black people could have better lives, but people who were otherwise economically downtrodden and disenfranchised, that they could have better lives. And this is the bonus content, because Ben Urban and Daryl Carlson had hit me up in our little chat group, and they said, I'm surprised that you're not going to say something about Good Friday and the sacrifice. Yes, there are sacrifices that people have made. And again, I'm going to pick on you, Aaron, that you have made incredible sacrifices to speak truth to power, that Carl Forehand has made incredible sacrifices to speak truth to power, that Jason Elam has made incredible sacrifice. I'm talking about people who had grand ministries. Jason had a church in Alabama with over 2,000 members. And when he began speaking truth to power, they kicked him to the curb.
Yeah.
Carl, when he began speaking truth to power, everything that he had, he lost everything. You You started speaking truth to power, and people started abandoning you.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, there are people who are actually, they are not being sacrificed. They have made themselves a sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
for the betterment of people around them. And so to all of you,
Mm.
to the Aaron Tomlinsons, to the Carl Forehands, to the Jason Elams, I salute you. I honor you today on this Good Friday. Thank you for being on the cross for the rest of us.
Boy, brother, I think that's, I mean, I'm humbled to be included in that company, but I know both Jason and Carl, and I don't know, man. I just feel like that's a good place to end. I mean, I know we
Yep,
usually go through the comments and stuff, but
it is.
I just think with it being Good Friday and what you said right there, uh, is so sacred that I think we should just
Just shut
bid
it down.
everybody adieu.
I'm good with that, man. I'm good
Yeah.
with that. Uh, Ben Urban says, "All hail Derrick Day, the Prince of Wokeness." No, listen, Aaron is the Prince of Wokeness. I'm expected to be woke. Aaron is not expected to be woke, but he is, and he
there,
is.
there is some truth to that. Yeah, there is some truth to that about expectations. All right, brothers and sisters, have a great Good Friday. Dude, what you just said there, I mean, it's just, I can't get past it. I mean, it's just so powerful. You know, we have this symbol, this narrative of Jesus dying on the cross for our sins, but the people that have, like Dr. King, you know, that have really laid it down to speak truth to power. People that have sacrificed areas of their lives, given up influence, given up paychecks to speak truth to power. You're the real
Listen,
hero. You're the real hero.
Carl Forehand bucked up against his mother.
Yeah.
I can't. I have nothing else to say to that.
Yeah.
So, and again, you have had to deal with all kinds of bullshit in your community. You know, Jason Elam, Jason had to fucking leave Alabama.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people like that. You know, I'm black, for fuck's sake. I'm expected to speak up, right? But it's like all of you guys, oh man. Anyway, go ahead and give the closing, give the benediction, brother, and let's
Thank you for coming to our Good Friday service this evening. We hope that you all have a wonderful Holy Saturday tomorrow, whatever you choose to do, and a very blessed Easter Sunday. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and listen, I hope that the Jesus between your legs is resurrected on Sunday. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Hey, you just used window there. I see what you've been doing. I see what you've been doing with all your posts and stuff. You're saying the most blasphemous, unthinkable things so that you can move that window. I finally get it. Brilliant, brilliant, my friend. I see what you did there.
On that note, peace and hair grease.
Peace and hair grease, everybody.